Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everybody. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Jonny Sue is still spinning on the ones and twos. And today in the studio, we have a great guest, a graduate of Pepperdine Law. She is the first public defender to run for District Attorney of L.A. She also was the lead staffer in one of the largest federal criminal justice reform budget signed into law. Rachel Rossi is here on the couch. How you doing, Rachel?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming in.
Yeah. So one of your big quotes you have, I'm going to just jump right into this because you're one of the most intriguing candidates out there right now. You're a public defender running for district attorney. And one of your quotes you have on your page, it says, if we want a new vision of justice, we can't stick to the same old playbook. We need a new kind of district attorney. Rachel Rossi, what does that mean?
So the reason I'm running is because I'm not your usual prosecutor running to be the prosecutor. I have a history of being an LA County public defender and an LA federal public defender. And that's important because if we really want to see change, if we really want to see more than just making our criminal justice system a little cuter or tweaking it here and there or improving it in moderate ways, we need someone with a different vision of the criminal justice system, someone who's seen the other side of the criminal justice system in order to have bold, transformative change.
Gotcha.
So who are your opponents? And tell us a little bit more about what sets you apart from them.
So in the race, we have the incumbent, Jackie Lacey. She's been in that seat since 2012.
Sorry, we used a boo sign over there.
And we also have George Gascon, who's coming from San Francisco, running for the seat as well. What I think is very important to keep in mind in this race, the reason that I'm running is because the status quo isn't working for LA County. It's not I'm not here to attack a person or a particular candidate, but I'm here to talk about what I saw in the courtrooms as just the status quo, the way things have been working in LA County for decades, and that needs to change. And so what we have right now are leadership in the office that have been fine with and complacent with allowing the status quo to continue, allowing things such as 80% of people in our LA County jails are Black and Latino. Mm-hmm. That should not be our status quo. We should be working proactively to change that. And that's why I'm running.
What's the number one issue, though, that you think that if you were elected that you would tackle right away? I mean, it's a broad thing. You said the overall system needs to change, but what specifically will you try to tackle day one?
The first thing that needs to change, we need to start to lay the groundwork to change the culture of mass incarceration that still remains in our prosecutor's office. The office still promotes attorneys, celebrates attorneys who have convictions, who have long sentences. We need to shift that culture to start to reward and incentivize decarceral outcomes and restorative, rehabilitative outcomes. Once we have that change in the culture, that is how all the other change begins to happen.
So flat out, Chesa Boudin was elected the district attorney. He is the son of very prominent activists. He ran as a democratic socialist. Do you think it's possible that somebody like you, what is actually shifting right now that we're seeing public defenders, get elected? And do you think LA is ready for somebody like you that is like an activist that is of the people? Because from what you know and I know, the LA County Democratic Party is just full of corruption.
It was very, very exciting to see Chesa Boudin's victory in San Francisco. I think it's reflective of a movement across the country. People want to see change in our criminal justice system. And for a long time, people thought that change could happen with changing the laws, with reforming certain ballot measures. And now what we're seeing is it's the prosecutors. Mm-hmm. It's the prosecutors who hold the keys. It's the prosecutors who enforce laws. It's the prosecutors who decide whether to circumvent laws and overcharge other types of offenses in order to get the same result despite legislation that is trying to decarcerate our communities. So what is exciting about it is that the public is now showing us we don't just want minor change. We don't just want progressive prosecutors. We want people who have a lifetime and a career committed to decarceral outcomes so that we can trust that that's what you're going to do when you're in this seat. And I absolutely think that LA is ready for that. Yeah. I think that we see in LA County some of the most progressive and innovative methods toward decarceration and toward reducing mass incarceration, but it has been the district attorney's office that is standing in the way.
Well, you have on your issues page and on your platform that you want to end racial disparities. Is that how you go about it, through decarceration, or is there another way that you can genuinely help with the racial issues? Because I see a lot of progressives or neo-progressives or whatever you want to call them nowadays on the left that sometimes push people away by trying to use their tactics by making everything racial or whatnot. How can you attack that and get some real, genuine change?
I think the racial disparities are a huge part, but we need to reduce looking at prison as an outcome for every stage of the process for everyone. Mm-hmm. I do believe that there are specific ways that we can look at the racial disparities in our system. And it starts with looking at the data. What we don't know right now is who is being charged. Mm-hmm. What are their genders? What are their races? Who's getting more time? Yeah. What are the sentencing outcomes based off of what type of ethnicity or background people have? Once we have the data, once we have the public awareness, then we can look at how can we craft policies that start to correct those disparities. Yeah.
How does economics play into this? Because there's always a lot of talk about race, and there's obvious disadvantages to people of color, and we've seen that very clear with Jackie Lacey and how she has pretty much authorized what has been going on. But how do we tie economics to it? Because a lot of this is also tied to poor people being incarcerated, to poverty being criminalized.
That's absolutely the case. If you look at projects like the $1 Million Hoods Project, you see that the majority of people going into our criminal justice system are coming from small pockets of neighborhoods that are low-income neighborhoods. And it starts with starting to reduce the filings of these broken window type offenses and these quality of life offenses, and reducing the way that we prosecute the homeless neighbors on our streets, and instead focusing resources on real offenses, on actual crime, rather than focusing so many resources on these low-level offenders that shouldn't even be in custody. Right now, 33% of people in LA County Jail are facing what some would call serious or violent charges. Only 33%. Why are so many people in our LA County Jail not even facing serious charges? That is something we need to look at.
Well, I went to a city council meeting with Fiorella, and it was in Azusa, I believe. Mm-hmm. And they were going to evacuate a homeless encampment by the river. A lot of people showed up within the community to kind of push for that. What do you tell those people? How do you get them to vote for you, who are going to say, well, listen, if you're not going to, criminalize people out here who are threatening my life, I can't go jogging in my neighborhood. Why should I vote for you? I mean, you're going to ruin my property value of my house, and you're not going to treat all criminals fairly just because they're homeless.
So criminalizing homeless people, number one, is inhumane. Number two, is often unconstitutional. But number three, for people who may not agree with me on those points, it doesn't work. What we've seen over the last 10 years is a 41% increase in our homeless population in our jails. And research shows that once you're homeless, once you're incarcerated, you are more likely to then be homeless. Yeah. So what we're doing is we are not only reinforcing, we are creating homelessness by incarcerating people. Yeah.
So give us a little bit of insight to this. Judge denies challenge to Rachel Rossi's ballot designation as, quote, public defender in race for LA district attorney.
What's up with that?
Yes. So I listed my previous position as federal public defender on the ballot, which is completely proper and permissible. What the law says is that you can put your principal occupation within the last calendar year. And so for a lot of people who put their ballot designations, they may put 3 positions. They may put 2 positions. They may put 1 position they have now, or whatever position they think most accurately reflects their career. Mm-hmm. Of my 10 years practicing, 7.5 of those years was as a public defender. And the ballot designation was legal and proper under the law, and I was glad to see that a judge immediately agreed with us and denied that frivolous
Why do you
challenge.
think they did that at first? Because when I see that, I'm like, oh, wait, the establishment is scared. They understand a public defender is really going to raise some eyebrows over here and possibly take away from their establishment candidate like a Jackie Lacey. Is that the reason why you think they tried to block that from going on there? Is it because of the movement?
I think it is very exciting that people see a public defender on a ballot as a challenge and as a threat. And I think it's actually reflective of where our community is, and goes back to your earlier question. Is LA ready for a public defender as a prosecutor? Absolutely. And that challenge further establishes that.
Where do you stand on both the death penalty and bail reform?
We've seen now that of the 22 people who have been placed on death row by our current district attorney, all of them were people of color. And that is extremely problematic. Before you even get to the ethical issues, the finality of the death penalty, we have these racial disparities. And how can we be okay with only sending people of color to death in our state? People in LA County, voters in LA County have said we're done with the death penalty. And we have a governor who's also said we are done with the death penalty. We need a district attorney in LA County who will agree with that and will no longer seek death.
Yeah.
When it comes to bail reform, I think a lot of people are confused right now because SB 10 just abolished cash bail in California, which is fantastic. It is an incredible move and something that we should have had a long time ago. But what it did was it replaced cash bail with a risk assessment system. And that risk assessment system, in the past, risk assessments have been shown to have incredible racial disparities. And so there are a lot of groups, advocacy groups, who are against cash bail, who are very concerned that what SB 10 put in place will actually result in racial disparities and an increase in pretrial detention. So now more than ever, we need a district attorney who not only understands the potential for harm here, but who will craft policies to mitigate against that harm and who will argue for and advocate for legislation to fix these problems with SB 10 in the future. And the district attorney has the power to do that. Even with the change in the law, there is considerable discretion for the district attorney to ask a judge whether or not someone should be detained pre-trial. There should be an extremely expansive policy to allow the most expansive release pretrial that we can have. Right now in our LA County jail population, 44% of people sitting in our jails are sitting there pre-trial. They have not been convicted of an offense. And that is problematic. We need to see those numbers go down because when you're detained pre-trial, you are at risk of losing your home, losing your job and custody of your children. It pressures you to plead guilty to something you didn't do. So we need to get back to establishing the presumption of innocence. And we need to fix that.
Well, you said how many people are sitting there pre-trial?
44% of people in the jail.
What percentage of those people are going to be let go, just not charged, whatnot? I understand there's a lot of people that they're not going to even be charged or prosecuted in the first place out of those people. They're going to be let go. So you're just wasting, we're holding people and we're stuck with the bill. What percentage of those people are going to just not even be charged, do you think?
I don't know how many wouldn't be charged, but I'll tell you this. When I was a public defender and I sat next to people who had to make the decision of sitting in custody, losing their livelihood and everything that they have to fight a case that they should have fought, that they should not have been charged with, or pleading guilty and getting out today, they always choose pleading guilty and getting out today.
Wow.
And that practice needs to end.
I was going to ask a question. Jackie Lacey just recently charged Harvey Weinstein out of the blue. I think it's because election time's coming up and Hollywood's got so much pressure. But there are a lot of predators in the Hollywood industry, okay? How are you going to have the guts to take on some of these powerful people? Could you get some of these people who are doing business with Jeffrey Epstein and lock them up somehow? How are we going to go after Hollywood, which is such a strong entity here?
Just the money, powerful people,
Absolutely. There are a lot of strong, powerful, money-driven entities that for too long our justice system has only comfortably prosecuted certain communities and not other communities. That's why I'm running, because I'm not a politician. I don't have a history of being tied to politics or politicians. I'm running because I want to see change, and I want to finally see a justice system that actually prosecutes in an even-handed way and not certain communities more than other communities.
So
there's some more. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. I just wanted to ask a particular question. What exactly differentiates you between your opponent, Gascon? Because when we were at the meeting where we heard both of you speak, Pasta said that it's sometimes hard for people to see
The separation.
The separation, because everybody's calling themselves a progressive nowadays, right? I'm not asking you to badger him, but what policy differences would you say you would advocate that he might not necessarily go for?
And, I'll say this. I respect George Gascon and his record and what he has fought for in San Francisco. But when it comes to platform and policy issues, look at my website, look at everyone else in this race's website. I'm the one talking about what we should do. I haven't heard much from others in this race on specifics. What are you going to do when you're elected? Don't talk about ideas, talk about specifics. And I have listed specific policy ideas on every portion of the criminal justice system, from prior to arrest to post-conviction and probation. And that's what we need to be focusing on. What is this leader going to actually do?
We're from Florida, and that, when it comes to our election integrity in Florida, forget about it. But then we experienced what we had in 2016 in California, and it was bad when it comes to our elections. Is there anybody that we can prosecute or maybe get some low-hanging fruit so people like elected officials like Alex Padilla can't cheat the system and take away our votes? As a DA, can you go after somebody to protect our election integrity?
So the district attorney's office has a justice system integrity division currently, and that is what that division is supposed to do. And also federally, that is often generally prosecuted more federally. But absolutely, one of the things that I would do as district attorney when it comes to prosecution of government officials and law enforcement is to increase the ethical divide between the district attorney's office and the politicians or law enforcement that they work too closely with every day. So one of the things I would do in law enforcement involved shootings resulting in death or potentially great bodily injury. I would actually appoint independent prosecutors for each one of those cases. And then when it came to other situations where there's alleged law enforcement misconduct, or if there's alleged politician misconduct, I believe that we need to strengthen the ethical divide in that division that exists currently. So a geographic separation, clear out the prosecutors who work there and put civil rights background persons and attorneys in that office, and people who have actually prosecuted corruption both at the government level and at the law enforcement level. We need to take it seriously in a different way, and we need to gain the public trust back that division is actually working for the people.
Yeah.
We've seen people like Ed Buck get away with so much. Black Lives Matter is an ardent opponent of Jackie Lacey. What specifically would you do to ease their worries as to a new DA coming into the fold in Los Angeles?
I think one of the biggest issues it has been that the justice system hasn't been for all, and it works for people depending on your occupation, depending on your status of income, depending on your ethnicity or your race. That's what we're seeing when we look at the results and who is in custody and who is not. And that's why some of the steps that I would take include being very clear about appointing different special independent prosecutors when it comes to prosecution of law enforcement. I think it's incredibly important that when we're looking at these cases, we have independent eyes looking at them. It's very similar to when you look at, the Mueller investigation, right? We as a country saw that we needed independence in that investigation, and everyone agreed on a bipartisan basis that needed to happen. We need that here in LA. We need an actual system that people can look at and say, okay, I trust that because I trust that there was some integrity behind it and there wasn't bias.
Do you have a candidate for president right now at this moment?
Not yet. Not yet.
You got a couple?
I do. I'm hoping to make a decision in the next week or two.
Yeah?
Yep.
You give us a little sneak peek about who or no?
Not yet. No.
Okay.
Well, I'll call you.
Gotcha. Let us know so we can break the news who you're endorsing first.
But I'll tell you this, whoever it ends up being, I want to be fully behind and backing and supporting and door knocking and doing what I can. And I think we all need to do that because we need change in the White House. And some are better than others, but everyone on that debate stage is better than what we have now. So we need to.
Go ahead.
Well, Pasta and you can have a conversation about that later.
I don't believe
I'll
that.
throw him out there. But I guess you are a lawyer. You are a public defender. What is your opinion on the current situation in Iran, the legalities of it? I know this is on a national and international level, but just your opinion on that.
Yeah, so, not something that I would really handle as a prosecutor,
No.
but in my experience when I was in DC working for just a short time, one of the things that I think is very incredibly important is the congressional input and when we decide to go to war, and not allowing a president to make decisions that threaten our community, our country, without congressional approval. So I think that's very important.
The AUMF, though, didn't that give him permission to do pretty much what he wanted to? Any president can label somebody as a terrorist and just go now?
There's problems with that, and I don't think so.
Yeah.
So, no, I think that there needs to be specific congressional approval. And I think it'll be interesting to see what Congress does and how we proceed.
Yeah. You know me, I'm all about my civil liberties. I talk about it all the time. And I always kind of say, what can a DA do to help protect my civil liberties? Can you go out and can you prosecute somebody at big tech? Can you prosecute somebody at Google? I know it's usually a nationwide thing, but if there are offices and people were doing nefarious things here in our own county, can you go after them?
I think there's two things the DA can do. First is you need to stand up against law enforcement practices that violate civil liberties. The district attorney needs to be clear that if law enforcement is conducting an illegal search, conducting an illegal interrogation, illegally tapping someone's phone, now with the new types of phones that we have, illegally putting someone's fingerprint or face up to a phone, right? We need a district attorney who will not file those cases, right? That's the first step. But the second part is we need good judges on the bench.
Yeah.
And as district attorney, I would do what I can with my platform to advocate for diversity on the bench and for people with backgrounds that understand civil liberties on the bench. When I was working in DC, one of the things I did was kind of work on nomination hearings. And I worked on the Kavanaugh hearing. And looking at his record on civil liberties was particularly appalling and terrifying to me because he had a really bad record when it came to civil liberties. And so we need to protect who's getting on the bench at the county level, because they become judges on the bench at the federal level, who become appellate judges, who then become Supreme Court judges. And so we need to, as a community, be more aware of that.
So just kind of going back on the tough on crime part, like how do you talk to people that are worried? In 1994, we had the crime bill that was painted as something that was supposed to protect Americans from predators. How do you talk to those people that are afraid, especially in a big city like LA, and that want people who are tough on crime?
So I would say that, there's this false narrative that safety equals incarceration, right? And now we look at the data and we have found that that is not the case. Instead, what we're doing, like I mentioned earlier, when 33% of people locked up in our jails are accused of serious offenses, and when we're spending $800 million a year just on our LA County jails, we're wasting resources that could be going towards protection, prevention of crime, and we're using them to lock up people that are not harming us. And that is why progressive reforms are reforms that are focused on public safety. We want to look at the data and say what works, what actually keeps the public safe. Let's do that instead of just a knee-jerk, throw everyone in jail reaction that is not proving to work.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have any more questions and stuff? Because there's some people that says, any thoughts about the repeal of habeas corpus with the NDAA?
We need habeas reform. I don't have specific thoughts on the NDAA. I can get back to you on that.
Yeah. When you say the habeas, we need certain reform on that. What do you mean exactly?
So habeas processes make it very impossible to get review and to get habeas review at that level. Over the years, reforms have made it near impossible, the hoops that you have to get to in order to, it's not an appeal, but it's sort of like an ancillary civil proceeding where you're saying, let me get out of prison, let me get out of jail. And what the laws have done have made it nearly impossible for people to get that relief.
How do you feel about the law enforcement has so many weapons available to them, and then that is a reason why so many people of color are afraid of also being disarmed while the police are so heavily armed. What is your opinion on how to deal with that precarious situation?
I think it's very important that we start to demilitarize our police. As a public defender, I had cases where I had clients who I had one client was at a Compton block party for 4th of July, and police showed up in riot gear because it was a block party in Compton. This is problematic because it starts it starts a conversation from a standpoint of I'm coming at you, against you in a position of war. And that escalates, and it begins to increase tensions between police and the community. So it's very important that we start to move away from that.
Yeah. What about people who say, well, Rachel Rossi has this anti-cop mentality? Is that true? And what do you say to that?
Not at all. I am so supportive of good law enforcement. And I believe that if we want to really support law enforcement, then we need to empower the good officers so that, right now, good officers oftentimes in certain agencies can't speak up because there's a culture that says we have to stand up for each other.
Yeah.
And I have seen officers who have been disappointed in what their colleagues have done, and they can't say anything against their colleagues. We need to empower good law enforcement because I have a vision for a day when we have communities that trust police, where we don't look at police when they start to make an arrest and whip out our phones to record them, but where we again can trust and work with police in a way that that they're part of our community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask also, too, that George Gascon got the endorsement from the Democratic Party. Yeah. That's usually strong when it comes to this position. Whoever gets that endorsement usually wins sometimes. How do you plan on beating George Gascon in the primary or getting up to face Jackie Lacey in the general election?
I think the Democratic Party's endorsement of George Gascon is reflective of our community being done with the status quo. Yeah. I think it's a very good sign because it is one thing to not get an endorsement as a brand new grassroots candidate that no one's really heard my name before, but they will. It's another thing to have an endorsement and to lose it. I think that is a very, very bold signal that LA County is sending that we are ready for reform.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can we find you, and just some closing out words of, why people should look at you, vote for you, and how can we donate and help?
Yeah. Tell us where we can give you some money at, Rachel.
I would love that. If you go to rachel4da.com with the number 4, please volunteer, sign up to get emails from me so I can tell you everything that's going on in our campaign. We are getting this will be the sneak peek. We are launching, and you'll hear very soon, we're launching a countywide listening tour. I'm sure you're all tired of hearing politicians talk to you. I'm coming around the county to listen to you. I want to hear what your issues are with the criminal justice system, what you've seen, what you want changed, and what you want in a prosecutor.
Nice.
That's a wonderful idea, actually.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Rachel. We do appreciate it. We wish you good luck in this run. Will you come back on and tell us more about what's going on as we get closer to the primary?
I would love it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks
for Pasta Jardula
and Fiorella,
Jonny Sue on the 1s and 2s with Rachel Rossi in studio.
Convo out.
Bye, everybody.